The 19th of February, 1965, 2:47 a.m. Malcolm X sat at his kitchen table, writing what would either be his suicide note or his declaration of war. 2 days earlier, he'd received the final confirmation. Captain Joseph X, his oldest friend in the Nation of Islam, had called with trembling hands. "Malcolm, they've set the date, the 21st of February. The Audubon Ballroom, 5 shooters. It is going to look spontaneous, but everything's planned." Most men would have fled, gone underground, disappeared into witness protection. But Malcolm X wasn't most men. He set down his pen, looked at the letter he'd just finished writing, and smiled. The letter wasn't addressed to his wife or children. It wasn't addressed to his followers or the media. It was addressed to Elijah Muhammad, the man who'd ordered his death. And it began with 5 words that would soon terrorize every enemy Malcolm had ever made. "Thank you for the opportunity." What Malcolm X was about to do wasn't just survive an assassination attempt. He was about to turn his own murder into the most devastating counter. Attack in political history, Malcolm had known this day was coming for months. The signs were everywhere. The house firebombing, the death threats, the surveillance. His former brothers in the Nation of Islam treating him like a dead man walking. But while his enemies were planning his death, Malcolm had been planning something far more dangerous. His resurrection, the 19th of February, 1965. Malcolm made his first move. He called a press conference for the next morning. Every major news outlet in New York, national television, radio stations, international correspondence. The message was simple. Malcolm X had something to say about the conspiracy against him. Something that would change everything. The Nation of Islam leadership panicked. They'd been planning a quiet assassination. Something that could be dismissed as a random act of violence. But Malcolm was forcing them to kill him in front of the entire world. Elijah Muhammad called an emergency meeting. "He is trying to back us into a corner," said Minister Farrakhan. "Then we don't give him the choice," Muhammad replied. "We move up the timeline tomorrow night, the 20th of February, before he can say whatever he is planning to say." But Malcolm had anticipated this exact reaction, because while they were changing their plans, Malcolm was executing his. The 20th of February, 1965, 6 p.m. Malcolm walked into the press conference carrying a single briefcase. 400 reporters packed the room. Camera flashes exploded like gunfire. Everyone expected Malcolm to expose the Nation of Islam's plot against him. Instead, Malcolm did something that shocked everyone. He smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Malcolm began, his voice calm and measured. "I've called you here today not to discuss threats against my life, but to make an announcement that will change the future of civil rights in America." The room buzzed with confusion. This wasn't what they'd expected. "For the past 6 months, I've been working on something unprecedented, a complete documentation of every illegal activity, every violent act, every corrupt deal involving not just the Nation of Islam, but every organization that has tried to suppress civil rights leaders in America." Malcolm opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "These files contain evidence that will destroy not just my enemies, but the entire network of corruption that has been poisoning American justice for decades." He held up a photograph. Bank records showing payments from the Nation of Islam to contract killers. Audio recordings of FBI agents planning assassinations of civil rights leaders. Photographs of government officials meeting with known criminals to arrange accidents for activists. The reporters were scribbling frantically. This was bigger than anyone had imagined. "But," Malcolm continued, "I am not releasing these documents today." The room fell silent. "I am releasing them tomorrow, the 21st of February at the Audubon Ballroom, at exactly 3 p.m. Malcolm closed the briefcase. "Anyone who wants to prevent this information from becoming public has approximately 18 hours to stop me." He walked toward the exit, paused, and delivered the line that would haunt his enemies for the rest of their lives. The question is, are they brave enough to try? Malcolm left the press conference knowing exactly what would happen next. Within an hour, every news station in America was broadcasting the story. Malcolm X was going to expose a massive conspiracy involving the Nation of Islam, the FBI, and organized crime. The evidence would be revealed the next day at the Audubon Ballroom. By 8 p.m., Malcolm's phone was ringing off the hook. Death threats, bribes, pleas for mercy. By 10 p.m., emergency meetings were being called in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York. The Nation of Islam leadership, FBI officials, and criminal organizations all faced the same crisis. Malcolm X had to die before 3 p.m. tomorrow, but Malcolm had just forced them to do it in front of 400 witnesses and national television cameras. The 21st of February, 1965, the Audubon Ballroom. Malcolm arrived early, carrying the same briefcase from the press conference. But now it contained something different, not just evidence of his enemies' crimes. A detailed plan for what would happen after they killed him. Because Malcolm X had realized something that would revolutionize political activism forever. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is control his own martyrdom. Malcolm had spent weeks preparing what he called the Phoenix Protocol, a systematic plan for how his death would trigger the complete destruction of everyone involved in killing him. Step 1. Make the assassination as public as possible. Force them to kill him in front of hundreds of witnesses and television cameras. Step 2. Ensure that his death immediately triggered the release of devastating evidence against his killers. Step 3. Turn his assassination into a rallying cry that would unite every civil rights organization in America. Malcolm wasn't just planning to die, he was planning to win. 3:05 p.m., Malcolm took the stage at the Audubon Ballroom. He could see them in the audience. Norman 3X Butler in the third row, Thomas Hagen near the back. 3 other shooters scattered throughout the crowd. Malcolm began his speech knowing that in minutes they would try to kill him, and knowing that when they did, they would destroy themselves. Salam alaikum, brothers and sisters. Today I want to talk about resurrection, about how sometimes a man has to die to truly become alive. The shooters tensed. This wasn't what they'd expected him to say. For months, people have been asking me if I am afraid to die. The answer is no. I am not afraid to die, because I've learned something that my enemies don't understand. Malcolm's voice grew stronger. Death is only the end if you let it be. But if you are smart enough, if you are prepared enough, if you are brave enough, death can be a beginning. That is when Norman Butler stood up and shouted, "Get your hands out of my pockets." The planned distraction right on schedule. Chaos erupted. The 5 shooters drew their weapons. But as the first gunshots rang out, something unprecedented happened. Malcolm X didn't try to duck, didn't try to run. Instead, he kept talking. "Brothers and sisters," Malcolm said, his voice carrying over the gunshots. "What you are witnessing right now is exactly what I predicted. The forces of oppression trying to silence truth with violence." More shots. Malcolm staggered, but didn't fall. "But what they don't understand," Malcolm continued, blood spreading across his shirt, "is that killing a messenger only makes the message louder." The shooters were confused. Malcolm should be dead by now. Why was he still talking? Because Malcolm X had spent 3 weeks preparing for this exact moment, not just physically, but psychologically. He'd trained himself to stay conscious through shock, practiced speaking through pain, prepared his body and mind to function long enough to deliver the most important speech of his life. "The evidence I promised to reveal today," Malcolm said, now leaning against the podium for support, "is already being broadcast on every television station in America." The shooters looked around in panic. This wasn't part of the plan. The documents are being published in newspapers across the country. The audio recordings are being played on radio stations from coast to coast. Malcolm smiled through the blood. "You see, gentlemen, I knew you would try to kill me today, so I arranged for my death to trigger something much more dangerous than my life ever was." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a radio transmitter. "This signal has been broadcasting live for the past 10 minutes. Every word, every gunshot, every moment of this assassination has been recorded and transmitted to news stations worldwide." Malcolm pressed the button one final time. The Phoenix Protocol is now active. What the shooters didn't know was that Malcolm had spent weeks setting up the most sophisticated dead man switch in political history. Sealed envelopes with evidence against his killers had been delivered to 200 news organizations worldwide, set to be opened if Malcolm died. Audio recordings of conspiracy meetings had been placed in safe deposit boxes, programmed to be released automatically. Photographs of criminal meetings had been sent to rival organizations who would use them to destroy Malcolm's enemies. Most importantly, Malcolm had recorded a final message that would be broadcast the moment news of his death hit the airwaves. As Malcolm finally collapsed on the stage of the Audubon Ballroom, his pre-recorded voice began playing on radio stations across America. If you are hearing this message, it means they have succeeded in killing my body, but they have failed to kill my mission. The evidence you are about to see will expose every person involved in my assassination. More importantly, it will unite every person who believes in justice to continue the fight they thought they could end by killing me. Within hours, the impact was devastating. The live broadcast of Malcolm's assassination had been seen by millions. The evidence he'd prepared was being published worldwide. The criminal conspiracy he'd exposed was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. Norman Butler, Thomas Hagen, and the 3 other shooters were arrested on live television. Within 24 hours, they'd confessed everything, providing even more evidence against their handlers. Elijah Muhammad tried to deny involvement, but the audio recordings Malcolm had gathered were undeniable. The Nation of Islam lost 90% of its membership within weeks. The FBI agents involved in the conspiracy found themselves under congressional investigation. Several resigned in disgrace. Others faced criminal charges, but the most powerful result of Malcolm's counterattack was what happened to the civil rights movement itself. Malcolm's assassination, instead of silencing dissent, had created a rallying cry that united every civil rights organization in America. His carefully planned martyrdom had accomplished what years of speeches and demonstrations couldn't. It had created unstoppable momentum for change. The footage of Malcolm continuing to speak while being shot became one of the most powerful images in American history. His final words about resurrection and the Phoenix Protocol inspired a generation of activists. Within 6 months, the Black Panther Party had formed, explicitly citing Malcolm's example as their inspiration. Within a year, Malcolm's autobiography became the most influential book in American civil rights history. Within 5 years, laws had changed, institutions had been reformed, and the entire landscape of racial justice in America had been transformed. Malcolm X had done something unprecedented. He'd turned his own assassination into his greatest victory. The 21st of February 1965, the day Malcolm X died and was reborn as something more powerful than any living leader could ever be. His enemies had tried to kill him to silence his message. Instead, they'd amplified it beyond anything he could have achieved while alive. The man who'd spent his life fighting for justice had used his death to guarantee it. Malcolm X didn't just survive an assassination attempt. He survived assassination itself, transforming from a man into a movement, from a voice into an idea, from mortal into eternal. His counter. Attack wasn't legendary because he lived through it. It was legendary because he died through it, and won anyway. The Phoenix had risen, and America would never be the same.